Welcome everyone, Costin here with a discussion about my least favorite races to play in Total War Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires. Now, these races, all of the races on this list, are perfectly playable races that have solid unit rosters and mechanics that can get them through a campaign without the pain of suffering that you would experience in, say, a Vampire Coast campaign or a Tomb Kings campaign. So these are all perfectly functional races, but I do thoroughly dislike playing them for a number of reasons. At number 5, we have Cathay. For a long time, before the release of Thrones of Decay, I would have said that if you were looking to play a human faction or an order faction, Cathay was actually your best bet. They have a great unit roster with a ton of variety, they have a good economy. In fact, their economy is so ridiculous that they can outnumber the Skaven in the hands of the player on Legendary. And considering that Skaven, Greenskins, Vampire Counts can get like 6-7 full stacks of units, that is pretty damn crazy. They have a good auto-resolve. They have units with high levels of armor, Jade Warriors in particular, and Jade Warrior Crossbowmen that are available fairly early on. But what are the problems of Cathay? Well, there are many, and I could spend half an hour talking about them. But in very short, Cathay is one of only 2 races in the game, the other one being Slaanesh, that has no easy way, or no way at all in the case of Slaanesh, of improving casualty replenishment. With the exception of the Whooshing Compass, and that's only 10%, which is not good enough. You need like 30% for casualty replenishment to not really be an issue. Now, the problem with casualty replenishment is a useful system not for replenishing after a very difficult battle. It's a useful system because there's all kinds of auto-resolved modifiers the AI gets for settlements, for difficulty, that make it so your armies take a significant amount of damage. And then you fight the battle and win it in 2 minutes flat. So we're spending 4 minutes in total going into the battle, getting out of the battle, fighting the battle itself. That is a waste of your time. That was a waste of your life, really. Of course, it is a balancing act with respect to that, to be sure, in a campaign. But the problem with Cathay is the fact that they only can use this for casualty replenishment does make for a less than stellar situation. Then on top of that, a lot of that unit variety that they have, artillery, flying artillery, heroes, monstrous units that were added to Shadows of Change, Terracotta Sentinels, Celestial Dragon Guard, Celestial Dragon Crossbowmen. Like, Cathay genuinely has some of the best infantry of the entire Order type, with the exception of the Dwarves, but well, let's just say that if you're playing Dwarves, you may want to recruit other things. But here's the thing. When you're actually playing a Cathayan campaign, you're probably going to finish that campaign only recruiting Jade Warriors and Jade Warrior Crossbowmen. Maybe some artillery if you really push for it and it lasts longer. And this is combined with the fact that in every Cathayan campaign, and that includes Yanbo, you take over Cathay, and that's kind of it. Your campaign is over, there's nothing really much more to it because of the climate limitations that you have to deal with. Because any other suitable climate that exists is very, very far away from you, and you're not really going to reach it. Yanbo has a better situation in regards to climate, but then he's stuck in freaking Lustrate. Yes, you can fix this with the climate modifier mod, but really, even then, the main meat of a campaign is in the early game, so having a lot of things restricted does make for a far less interesting campaign dilemma. Then there's the Great Bastion, which is an annoying system to put it mildly, and then there's the Yin Yang system, the Harmony system. I'll probably make a video on the entire subject of Cathay, but because there is a lot of things to talk about. But suffice to say, the Harmony system is a whatever system. There's no reason when you're playing a Cathayan campaign to ever go for anything other than pure Harmony. One of the reasons behind that is because of the penalties you get for Yin or Yang, but realistically, it's because getting full Yin or Yang requires you to get a lot of structures for that, and you're actually losing in other respects. So say, for instance, you want to go a Yin, right, and get that sweet construction cost benefit, and growth benefit, to be sure, in construction time. Well, the construction time requires you to get +6 yen, so you're not even going to be able to do it in a province like the Gunpowder Road. That's, by the way, a problem. But even if you're going down that path, let's say you go full yin, well, the wares market from Yang generates more money, early on in the campaign especially. The lumber mill gives you a -6% construction cost for all buildings in a local province. So you are losing things for the sake of doing it, and Perfect Harmony gives you 20% campaign movement range, minus 25% upkeep, and 15% income. Basically, there's no point to go for anything other than the Perfect Harmony. It is less annoying than it was for a very long time until Shadows of Change, but it's just a nothing system in a lot of ways. Hopefully this will get improved with another Cathay DLC, but yeah, the unit requirements, the tier requirements of that, the hero recruitment requirements, the lack of a replenishment hero, which, by the way, the Gate Master should have been a replenishment hero. We don't need training in a Cathayan campaign, because we can get a lot of unique experience in a Cathayan campaign. We did not need a training hero in a Cathayan campaign, we needed a replenishment hero. I really have no idea what Creative Assembly was thinking of that. Maybe Alchemist should give replenishment as opposed to movement range. I would actually make that per territory, because you have plenty of movement range anyway. And number 4, it is the High Elves. Oh yes, the High Elves. The one race that has never seen a proper rework from Creative Assembly, but that's because the High Elves always worked ever since they were introduced in Warhammer 2. And that is saying quite a lot about the people who designed this race. Also the people who designed Dark Elves back in Warhammer 2. And also the people who designed the Skaven, funnily enough. Yeah, you know, getting 3 out of 4 races done very well just shows that the developers who handled Warhammer 2 know what the heck they were doing with regards to the game. Sure, there have been changes, but the problem with the High Elves is similar to Cathay. A lot of the units that would give them variety are locked behind higher tiers, and they're just not worth recruiting. Do you know why they're not worth recruiting? Because archers and spearmen are capable of dealing with the vast majority of threats. And if they're not, bring another army, and a third army, and a fourth army. There's almost no reason in a High Elven campaign to recruit anything else. You do have a ton of units, a huge amount of variety, but there's literally no reason. So I think High Elves do need some significant buffs, at least through research trees, skill lines. For these other units, we do also need changes to how skill lines work, because one of the problems with unit variety that exists in virtually every campaign is the fact that so much power for units in a campaign is tied to the red skill line. So why bother getting anything other than archers when you know Bone Master is going to be very significant? And look, even if you had unlimited skill points, or you had level 50 starting lords, let me tell you something about that. You would be much better suited spending your points in other things rather than getting a lot of the very significant buffs that you can get for the red skill line. You're much better off getting the blue skill line, for instance, getting lightning strike over here through the blue skill line, getting upkeep, campaign movement range, getting the melee skill line or the magical skill line for a lord. That is kind of one of the problems that does exist with regards to how things work in Warhammer. But I think it does affect the High Elves in far worse than other races because of the tier requirements, because of the way their economy works, their campaign work, and so on and so forth. Their research tree is not horrible, but it is annoying having a lot of very useful things like, you know, Maritime Empire locked behind getting higher tier buildings. It's not as bad as the Lizardmen, to be clear. Lizardmen are horrible because they need a ton of different buildings that you would never build otherwise in a campaign just to unlock the various research trees. High Elves only need a couple of buildings. Like, typically speaking, in a High Elf campaign, you need the Mage building to get military advancements too. You need an Elven Court, which you'd probably want to get anyway for noble capacity, and you need a Shrine of Asuryan. So it's nowhere near the level of Lizardmen, but it's still a problem. And by the way, this is actually an issue that Skaven do also have, but Skaven kind of don't give a shit about that, really, because Skaven can get a lot of buildings very quickly because they have instant construction of settlements up to tier 5 by spending food. Maybe that's a mechanic a lot more races should have. But on top of that, the reason High Elves are worse from my perspective. Yes, you don't have the replenishment issue because you can get one noble. Only one, though, until you get to tier 4. So you do have the replenishment. It's just, yeah, it's kind of annoying, the tier requirements. But the thing that makes High Elves worse is, do you know how you fix the unit variety issue? You abuse the crap out of the game. You get Archmage Lords. Like, the whole influence system is just so completely pointless. You get Archmage Lords with Administrator. Good luck if you don't have the Warden in the Punch DLC. It's going to be a far worse experience in a Hell of campaign. and you get instant construction and free construction, because this straight stacks. So you just have 4 of these Archmage Lords in a single province, instantly constructing everything, instantly, and for free. It's one thing. I wish to point out the difference. It's one thing for Karl Franz to use nobles and open the gates, which is unique to him, to get instant construction. But he has to pay for it all the same, and that forces you to make all kinds of interesting decisions in your campaign to keep the economy going. Do you rush for tier 5? You can, but you're going to pay for it significantly. You might even go bankrupt early on in a campaign, because obviously supply lines are going to affect you. But when you have free construction, you end up with so much money, it's completely irrelevant. It completely breaks the game and completely trivializes the whole damn point of a campaign. Sure, it will give you the unit and hero diversity that you are so sorely lacking, but it is really not a good way of doing it. Besides, it just means you're ignoring the entire point of the influence system to recruit these kind of positive traits in the first place, so that does desperately need a change from my point of view. High Elves work. Don't get me wrong, they work, they're playable, they're perfectly functional. You go with Administrator, you have so much money, you'll build whatever the heck you want. But what is the point of playing a campaign if you know you're just going to trivialize the entire game and you're going to break the shit out of it? You know, abusing mechanics can be fun in certain circumstances, when it actually forces you to make interesting decisions. But when cheesing the game just completely breaks the game in such a way that you abuse everything and nothing is able to stand in your way, doesn't quite work like that. Another thing that I find really annoying about the High Elves is their confederation. So as far as I can tell, and this is based on 3,000 hours of experience in Total War, so correct me if I'm wrong, but here's what I can tell. The more of Ulfwine that you own, the easier it is to confederate other High Elven factions. To be certain, if you're looking at confederating, say, Alariel or Alfarian, if you're playing as Tyrion, beyond needing to own their DLCs, what you will need to do is actually screw them over. Like, if you're playing Tyrion, you want to take Safri before Alariel. If you're playing Alariel, you want to take Safri before Tyrion. Then you might want to race for Southern Reverse to take that before Alfarian, and then take Halador before Tyrion hops on over there. So you limit these factions to a single province, and then you take their territory. That is such a really awful system, and it's such an awful way, really, of playing the campaign. Like, there's so many factors that make it awful. The research tree makes it awful because you're always rushing for certain buildings to unlock things. At least once you unlock them, you don't have to worry about them, unlike Lizardman. Again, like, Lizardman research tree is, like, just burn it all to the ground, throw it out. Like my perspective on Lizardman, people keep asking me about that. You know what I would do with the Lizardman? Completely remove them from the fucking game. No one would, that would be my perspective of Lizardman. Completely remove them from the game. No one would miss them. That's not what I can say about the High Elves, but still, it's pretty damn awful, the way things are working right now. Dark Elves work exceptionally well. I know that may not necessarily be a popular opinion, but it's simply a fact. High Elves don't. And it's quite tragic. They're a perfectly functional race with a great deal of diversity in it, and some really fun and legendary lords. There's some issues with those lords, like the annoyances with Alfarian, Alariel, and God help Teclis, because he does need a divine intervention at this point to actually have a good campaign. You know, I'm really disappointed with Teclis. I've always been disappointed in his campaign ever since he came out in Warhammer 2. Teclis was one of the first characters that I knew about in Warhammer lore. And he's always had a nothing campaign that's never, ever been worth playing. So I guess that's how I feel about the High Elves. I'm not angry, I am disappointed. And number 3 is Nurgle. To be certain, Nurgle is much improved compared to where it was before the release of Thrones of the King. They have a really solid unit roster that's very strong, very durable. They have some of the best infantry in the entire game. They have some really good spells. They have some really fun mechanics with the plagues. And then you never use them in a campaign because of the pacing of campaigns and the way Nurgle mechanics work. The chief problem I have with Nurgle is that they're using one resource for pretty much everything. Like, money doesn't even matter in a Nurgle campaign. Forget money, it's an irrelevancy. You know what matters? infections. Like, literally, when you start a Nurgle campaign, throw away the income building and start getting infections and hero recruitment buildings, because you're gonna need those hero recruitment buildings, because good luck recruiting actual units in a campaign as Nurgle. See, your infections are used, again, for everything. You want to recruit units, you need to use infections. You want to get research, you need to use infections. You want to use the nasty Nurgle plagues, you need to use infections. And these are so incredibly limited during the course of a campaign, it's not even funny to think about. Like, you don't, like, consider Skaven, consider a lot of other races, actually. But think of Dark Elves, for instance, or Cast Dwarves. They gain slaves labor for every battle, and then they have a post-battle option that gives them more. Nurgle has to specifically go for one post-battle option that gives them infection. It's not really a huge amount of infections either, and that is not great. It creates a system where later on in the campaign you just don't give a damn about them, but early on in the campaign it is a severe limitation, because it's going to force you to have fewer armies. Not because you can't afford those armies. No, you very much can afford those armies, but you can't recruit them because of the way the system is handled. Then you want to use Nurgle plagues? Well, enjoy using a bunch of plagues that don't play as much of a role as you would hope for them to do on the campaign map, because, again, you can't unleash as many plagues as you should be able to. And also, I've stated this before, and I'll say it again. Do you know which is the scariest plague in the campaign? The Skaven plague. That is genuinely painful to deal with. Nurgle plagues, when used by the AI, are an insignificant aspect. Skaven plagues might blow up your own empire when you're using them, and they genuinely hurt the AI as well on Legendary when you use them. Sure, you can get a similar plague as Nurgle, but Skaven get it very easily for a right. They don't have to sacrifice anything else except money for it. You have to sacrifice a bunch of resources that could be used better to get some really powerful research or get a bunch more units. Fun. Really, really fun. Don't get me wrong, Tamarkan has a really great campaign. Or really great campaign mechanics, and it's a really great campaign. But do you know what sucks in every Nurgle campaign? Climate. So Nurgle, when you look at a climate situation, you think Nurgle is great, is fantastic. But except for one thing. Nurgle gets affected more by unpleasant climate than the vast majority of races. But you might think, oh, you have so much climate, why do you care about it? Every Nurgle campaign has to deal with mountains in their campaign. And mountains is the one climate that is, one, widespread, and they don't have as pleasant. Kugath, you've got a mountain as a provincial capital in the province north of you. Yes, you can use climate penalty removal mods to fix that, if you will. I firmly recommend using that as a baseline in every campaign, but it is not great. Epidemius has to deal with it. Tamarkan has to deal with it. And it's even worse than this. Nurgle has a great deal of power because one of the things Nurgle can do is vassalize factions for diplomacy. It's annoying as hell because one of the ways you make that work is selling settlements or provinces to factions with military buildings in them. But all your military buildings cost infections. That is already annoying. The construction time for these Tier 1 barracks is also annoying. Like, I could understand an advanced military building taking 4 turns, or 3, or 2. But a basic military building taking 4 turns to build is just to build, not to cycle, to build. I can understand the cycle. I can even appreciate it. But the build should be 1 turn. Or 2 turns at most. Not 4 freaking turns or 6 for an advanced military building. It means Nurgle is really powerful in the long term, but the meat of a campaign is in the early game. So yeah, you'll obliterate everything in the long term because you've gotten used to getting away with a lot less than that. So once you do finally build up stuff, you are unstoppable, but it's getting to that point that's really frustrating. And that is the reason I dislike playing Nurgle. Also really frustrating with diplomacy that, you know, I can vassalize Grimgor or Greasus or Kolak in a campaign as Tamarkan, for instance, but no, I can't win like that. I have to destroy them. Why add vassalization as a baseline diplomatic option and then add these victory conditions which require you to destroy other factions? It is ridiculous. Say what you will about Nakari. Say what you will about Slaanesh. Slaanesh the people who made those victory conditions for Slaanesh understood that you could win through vassalization. Diplomatic vassalization, not subjugation, which is another option that certainly Nurgle doesn't have. But it is certainly very frustrating. It's not just an issue for Tamarkan. Certainly it's a bit annoying as Vlad, because you could vassalize Karl Franz, but no, you have to destroy him. But that frustration is nowhere near as prevalent as in a Nurgle campaign, because why in the world would you pick a fight with fricking Grimgor? Ignoring the fact that it's Grimgor, and all that comes with that, this territory is meaningless in your campaign. It adds nothing that you want, or very, very little. You have a campaign where it's incredibly painful to deal with unpleasant climate by default, but your campaign objectives require you to spend 30 plus turns dealing with unpleasant climate. Seriously, Creative Assembly. Who the hell put this? I really believe Tamarkan was designed for Realms of Chaos and just added in Immortal Empires, because it really is felt in regards to that. And don't get me started on Epidemias, what a crap campaign. I think CA has learned its lesson. That's why we get the campaign like Arbol, which is a phenomenal campaign, but yeah, Nurgle could use some help from my perspective. Really frustrating, though. Really damn frustrating. And number 2, it would have to be the Warriors of Chaos. So Warriors of Chaos are a really well-designed race. The Warband upgrade system is such a phenomenal system that I believe it should become a baseline for every single race in the game. Just a great job over there. As it was when Creative Assembly added it in A Total War Saga Troy. I don't have enough movement reach, by the way, to take this capital here. Or maybe I do. Actually, I do. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. Well, usually you should, but I actually had a campaign where it didn't. But here's the problem with Warriors of Chaos. Great unit variety, great mechanics. Be'lakor has a bunch of teleportation, really fun campaign. Huge amount of diversity of units, like one of the highest in the entire game. And you might say, oh, it's just reskins of units. Yeah, it is reskins of units, but let me tell you, these units play a very, very different role in battle. Consider this. A Chaos Knight with Lance of Sunish is one of the best charge cavalry in the freaking game, because they got Devastating Flanker and they have an 80 charge bonus. Compare that to a Chaos Knight of Khorne. They still have a huge charge bonus, but they don't have Devastating Flanker. However, they're good in a longer fight because of that Frenzy benefit and because of that spell resistance benefit that they have. So these units play differently. They have different roles. They have different purposes in a battle. Consider one of a siege. You have barriers. You can charge in, deplete the barrier, charge out, get out, regain the barrier, charge in again and again. So sustainability over there, or pure durability of the pure durability that Nurgle has. So there is a great deal of variety. But here's my problem with Warriors of Chaos. It's every single one of their campaigns is a nothing campaign, because your Dark Fortresses are such formidable elements with such powerful garrisons. Consider a Dark Fortress at tier 3. That is a reasonable standard, I consider it. You got armor cast trolls, you got chaos warriors over here, you got an exalted hero, you got chaos warriors with halberds, and that's just the baseline garrison. It is strong, and then every single Warriors of Chaos has a vassal faction that they inherently get, with the exception of Festus, but he can subjugate Hockland, so does it really matter over there? So you can subjugate legendary lords and just outplay the campaign. Effectively, every single Warriors of Chaos campaign is finished by turn 1, and everything else is a waste of time. A lot of the research is annoying to uncover because it takes 15 turns to just unlock these unit types. Gets annoying, I gotta admit, to unlock the different marks. It can be annoying growing these Dark Fortresses. You'll get to tier 2, tier 3 pretty quickly, but tier 4, tier 5, that is kind of annoying. You don't need it because of the Warband upgrade system, but it is one of those limitations in a campaign. To be sure, Warriors of Chaos do not feel the penalty of requiring higher tier settlements, so that's great, but if there's no challenge in a campaign, if there's nothing at stake, then what's the damn point in playing it? And that's how I feel about every single Warriors of Chaos campaign. They're strong, they're well designed, they have a great deal of variety, but there's absolutely no meat to any of their campaigns. There's some fun factors, like Festus actually having the best play campaign in the game. Yes, much better than all the Nurgle campaigns, maybe even combined. Having every single climate in the game being viable, really, really good. I do like the intent of Dark Fortresses, but I think the way that they end up working the game just Yeah, completely breaks the intent of the game. Certainly much better than they were before, and holy crap did we wait for a very, very long time for Creative Assembly to fix Warriors of Chaos, but again, there's just nothing at stake. You could possibly declare war on the entire world, and it would take endgame crisis armies to defeat your initial Dark Fortress in a Warriors of Chaos campaign. Especially like Bellacor's little island over here, good luck losing that. I mean, I don't know how hard you'd have to try, but I'll just give you an idea. I've played a 40-turn campaign, or how many turns? No, 50. A 52-turn campaign over here as Karl Franz, and Lewin, and even though Bellacor's been at war with Lewin for a very long time, and Lewin's been obliterating his armies for a long time, it's like Be'lakor still hasn't lost this freaking island. Bretonnia hasn't even tried to invade it. That it's that kind of situation. Like, I don't know how hard you'd have to fuck up to really lose this campaign. I think it would be a monumental screw up. And granted, it is difficult to lose a campaign when you know what you're doing, but it is possible to reach a point where it's now worth pursuing a campaign or continuing because you've lost too much. That doesn't happen in a Warriors of Chaos campaign. And that's my personal issue. It's too slow in terms of research and all that stuff. Be'lakor is better because he starts with all these gifts of chaos unlocked, so that's much better than the other ones, but even so, limitations. And nothing campaigns like... The warband upgrade system is great. The warband recruitment system, however, maybe not necessarily quite as much. And then finally, at number 1 is the Wood Elves. Wood Elves are the masters of the Intern Bio Simulator. A lot of factions do actually get along with them, and really their entire campaign mechanics are designed in such a way that, oh, you're just gonna have to wait until a forest heals, and then you do a ritual where a bunch of rogue armies spawn that you usually defeat, and then you win the campaign. It also says, I guess, something about the pacing of campaigns, that's like turn 23 and it will take me 33 turns to get to tier 4. And that's not even the higher end, because, yeah, we still have 18 turns beyond that. So turn 60 is when CA, or thereabouts, is when CA expects you to get to tier 5. Mind you, this is rushing for it by spending all of my money on it. But here's the problem with Wood Elves. In theory, Wood Elves don't have the problems that High Elves do have, because they have really powerful melee units available early on. That you may not necessarily have much of a reason to recruit them, that's a different fact. But you do have heroes available. You do have different units available. You have cavalry, you have forest spirits, you have range units, you have really, really good viable choices over there. Getting mages is a bit annoying because you need to use surplus points, which are much better spent on your economy, but at least it's there, right? The availability of stuff is there. That's not the problem. The problem is you only care about a couple of select settlements, and it's all about those settlements and just making allies with other factions that control the territory around you, pacifying these territories. So you're encouraged to abuse the AI in every way possible. At least you get guaranteed confederation, though it is annoying having to defeat certain factions of certain races, like, oh, fight the dwarves 3 times in order to confederate Durfolk. But first, you actually need to grow the Oak of Ages in order to get access to that. So that ends up being somewhat or very annoying in a campaign. But hey, at least it does work, right? So can't complain too much about that. It does work, but it's an intern button simulator type situation because it takes a long time. And here's the thing. In theory, you're supposed to have a good amount of variety with regards to these trees, right? Because they do give you a bunch of different effects dependent on which ritual you go for. In theory, I emphasize that aspect. In practice, none of the other trees are worth it. Obviously, the Oak of Ages is worth it, but do you know which tree ritual you should always go for? The one in Cathay. One, because it's very easy, just show up over here as quickly as possible and take a Whaley village from the Burning Nomads. And then because the landmark that you get once you do the ritual is easily the strongest freaking landmark in the entire game for the Wood Elves. It gives you Forest Dragons at tier 3. It gives you a minus 30% upkeep for Forest Spirit units, which are really good. And never mind the bullshit that never mind the complete and utter bullshit that Orion has with free armies. Yeah, that's complete bullshit. And there are a handful of other good landmarks, but there is literally no reason why you shouldn't go for this. You will have much more power in your campaign if you go for Cathay. I mean, beyond the fact that going over here for Cathay gives you this army. Like, I actually got rid of a bunch of tier 1 Glade Guards over here, but you get 3 Malevolent Treekins, 2 Malevolent Treemen, 3 Malevolent Dryads. I guess you could wait a bit longer for this army to recruit more stuff, you know, more Malevolent units, unless you're playing Dry Cup, but yeah, just not really worth it to go for any of the other forest spirits, because any other trees, because none of them give you anything as close as the benefit that you get over there. Like, yeah, you can recruit Treekin at tier 3, you can recruit Treekin at tier 3 anyway in every single fucking campaign, so who gives a shit, basically. Like, oh, you can get Treemen. Okay, Treekin are better, they're cheaper, they're more viable in a lot of different ways. There is some power, and that's the thing, like, consider getting 3 men versus, oh, I don't know, getting 10% missile strength for all your armies. So 30% upkeep and 10% missile strength versus some of these other benefits. Like, ooh, we can recruit Wild Riders and Desert Attrition Immunity. Yeah, that's great, really. So the supposed variety that you have in a Wood Elf campaign is just not there. Well, it doesn't exist in a lot of ways. You may maintain a lot of armies, you may have a ridiculous amount of power, but just not there. Also, you're supposed to get Amber for every one of these, but realistically, you'll be so bored out of your mind by the time you deal with the first ritual that doing any other is going to be a freaking awful experience. Besides, you can probably win the campaign faster than doing more than 2 rituals in your campaign, because you do 2 rituals, you can heal out, like by that point Avalorian should be healed up decently enough, especially if you focus on getting Avalorian healed up, and then you do the ritual over here for Avalorian, heal up, and GG, well played, campaign is over, more or less. That is not great. It's a question of pacing and a very, very passive enter and button simulator playstyle. It is thematic for what it's worth, but geez. Like, when Wood Elves were reworked in Warhammer 2, it was awesome. In Warhammer 2. They haven't been changed since Warhammer, from Warhammer 2 to Warhammer 3. Beastmen have a similar issue, sure. But the enter and button simulator aspect really needs to go away, from my perspective. That's all I had to say. Christine signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and enable notifications, and stay tuned for more.